In 2025, silence is a superpower. We live in a time when everyone wants a reaction, your energy, your attention, your peace. But the truth is, you don't owe anyone an emotional response. You don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to argue. And you don't need to announce your exit. The most powerful move you can make? Cut them off, quietly, silently, without drama. Why? Because reaction is currency. Every time you react, you're paying someone in attention. And not everyone deserves that. In neuroscience, we call it neural adaptation. Your brain rewires based on repetition and reward. The more you engage with toxic people, the more your brain normalizes stress, anxiety, and emotional chaos. But the moment you remove the stimulus, the moment you go silent, you stop feeding the loop. You break the pattern. You teach your nervous system safety. You reclaim your time, your mental clarity, and your self-respect. Cutting someone off silently isn't cold, it's controlled. It's not about ego, it's about boundaries. No reaction is still a reaction, and it's often the loudest one. So this year, don't chase closure. Don't debate disrespect. Don't negotiate your peace. Protect your energy like your life depends on it, because it does. If someone repeatedly shows you they don't value your presence, show them the power of your absence. You don't need revenge. You don't need drama. You just need silence. And in that silence is your strength. In a world that thrives on noise, opinions, arguments, and endless back and forths, silence becomes a rare and deeply underestimated force. We're conditioned to believe that the louder we are, the stronger we are. That if we don't speak up, we're being weak. But that couldn't be further from the truth, especially in 2025, where digital chaos and emotional bait are constant. Silence is not submission, it's not avoidance, it's strategic discipline. When you choose silence over reaction, you're no longer operating from impulse, you're operating from intention. You're no longer letting someone else steer your emotional state. Instead, you're reclaiming authority over your internal environment. This is what real power looks like. Self-regulation in a world that demands self-abandonment. The moment you go silent on someone who expects a fight, a breakdown, or a plea, you shift the entire dynamic. You remove the fuel from their fire. You communicate that your peace is non-negotiable, and you do it without saying a word. That's strength. That's composure. Silence is also the space where clarity lives. When you're not reacting, you're thinking clearly. You're giving your nervous system the signal that it's safe, that it doesn't have to live in a constant state of emotional warfare. And that neurological calm doesn't just feel good, it heals. It rewires your stress response. It builds resilience, and it teaches your brain that not everything deserves your energy. Most people think strength is about confrontation, about showing up with loud boundaries and louder words. But often, the real flex is walking away quietly while staying rooted in self-respect. Because silence, every time you react, you're spending something valuable. Your emotional energy, your attention, your focus. And in 2025, attention is one of the most exploited resources on the planet. People, platforms, and even relationships are constantly vying for it. But what most don't realize is that attention isn't free. It comes with a cost. And that cost is often your peace of mind. Think of your reaction like a transaction. Every time someone provokes you and you respond emotionally, you're essentially paying them with a piece of your energy. You're giving them access to your internal state. You're letting them rent space in your head for free. And over time, those small emotional withdrawals can lead to burnout, anxiety, and disconnection from your true self. Some people don't actually want resolution. They want a reaction. They feed on the drama, the attention, the emotional pull. They know how to press your buttons and they thrive off the chaos it creates. But when you stop reacting, you stop feeding them, you take back your power, you shift the control. From a neuroscience perspective, this matters. Your brain is constantly creating pathways based on repetition. If you constantly react to negativity, your brain wires for stress. But when you pause, when you refuse to react, you're rewiring your brain for clarity, patience, and emotional discipline. This doesn't mean you suppress your emotions. It means you master them. You choose what deserves your energy. You understand that not every battle is worth fighting, and not every provocation deserves a performance. So before you respond, ask yourself, is this worth the emotional currency I'm about to spend? Because once it's spent, you can't get it back. Your brain is not just reacting to your environment, it's constantly adapting to it. Every conversation, every interaction, every emotional trigger is shaping your neurological wiring in real time. And here's the unsettling truth. If you stay in toxic environments long enough, your brain begins to normalize dysfunction. It starts accepting chaos as the default setting. This process is called neural adaptation, a foundational concept in neuroscience. It means that the more frequently you expose your brain to something, the more it gets used to it, even if it's damaging. So if you're constantly exposed to manipulation, emotional instability, passive aggression, or subtle disrespect, your nervous system begins to expect it. Worse, it starts craving it in a twisted, unconscious way because it feels familiar. And familiarity is powerful. The human brain is wired to seek comfort in what it knows, even if what it knows is painful. That's how people stay in toxic relationships, unhealthy friendships, and draining cycles for years. They've been neurologically conditioned to confuse intensity with connection and unpredictability with excitement. But here's the critical part. The brain can unlearn those patterns. When you remove yourself from that environment, when you go silent, when you cut the cord, your brain finally has space to recalibrate. It begins to detox from the emotional highs and lows. Your stress response, which has been firing constantly like an alarm system, starts to quiet down. Your body relearns safety. Your mind relearns peace. However, this healing doesn't happen when you keep dipping back into the drama. If you stay in contact, if you keep reacting, if you continue giving your energy to the same patterns, your brain stays stuck in survival mode. It never gets the chance to reset. That's why cutting someone off silently isn't just about emotional boundaries. It's about neurobiological protection. You're not being dramatic, you're being scientific. You are choosing to break the loop, to create new pathways, and to teach your nervous system that it deserves better. You're choosing a new default, one rooted in calm, clarity, and control. One of the biggest internal battles people face when walking away from toxic dynamics is the guilt, the doubt, the fear of seeming heartless, cold, or too harsh. Society often conditions us to equate kindness with constant access. We're taught that if we care, we stay. That if we're strong, we keep trying. That if we're mature, we talk it out, even if the other person continues to cross our boundaries. But here's the truth that a lot of people don't want to admit. Cutting someone off silently and decisively is not cruel. It's clarity. There's a point where explaining becomes enabling, where repeating yourself turns into self-betrayal. You don't have to light the bridge on fire. You don't have to scream or slam doors, but you do have the right to walk away quietly, peacefully, and with no performance. That's not an act of bitterness. That's an act of self-respect. We need to shift the narrative around what it means to be nice. Being nice doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. It doesn't mean keeping toxic people around to avoid uncomfortable conversations. Emotional maturity isn't measured by how much you can endure. It's measured by how clearly you can protect your peace without apology. And the most mature boundary is often the one you set in silence. You're not punishing anyone. You're simply choosing not to participate in dysfunction. You're not being passive-aggressive. You're being self-aware. There's a difference between ignoring someone out of spite and choosing silence out of self-preservation. And that distinction matters. Also, people often assume that if you don't explain your departure, you're being unfair. But sometimes the explanation has already happened through your patience, your warnings, your attempts to communicate. Silence becomes the final statement when words have lost their value. So when you cut someone off without a big announcement, you're not trying to hurt them. You're just done hurting yourself. You've realized that your energy is sacred, that healing can't happen in the same environment that caused the harm, that it's not your job to fix people who refuse to grow. You've stopped waiting for them to understand and started choosing to be understood by your own nervous system. We live in a world where volume is often mistaken for value, where people believe the more you say, the more power you hold. But the truth is, silence, when used with intention, is far louder than any argument, clapback, or emotional outburst. It pierces through the noise in a way that words rarely can. When someone disrespects you, lies to you, manipulates you, or drains your energy, and you respond with nothing, you shift the power dynamic instantly. Not because you're pretending not to care, but because you actually care enough about yourself not to engage. That kind of restraint speaks volumes. It communicates that you're no longer available for the game. You're no longer accessible for the push and pull. And you've stepped out of the arena completely. In neuroscience and behavioral psychology, this is recognized as a disruption of reinforcement. Toxic people often operate on a reward system. They do something to provoke you. And when you react, they feel validated. They feel in control. Your anger, your sadness, your pleas, all of it becomes proof that they still have emotional leverage over you. So when you remove your reaction, you remove the reward. You remove the control. And that absence hits harder than anything you could have said. Silence forces people to sit with themselves. It takes away their ability to redirect blame or spin narratives. When you don't defend, justify, or argue, you're holding up a mirror. And most people aren't ready to face their own reflection without the distraction of your response. But this doesn't just apply to others. It's about what silence gives you too. It gives you clarity. It gives you space to observe the situation from a calm, grounded place. It creates distance between stimulus and response, which is where all emotional wisdom lives. In that space, you start to realize you're not here to perform. You're not here to convince. You're not here to be understood by people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Your lack of reaction becomes a boundary, a message, a declaration. It says, I see exactly what's happening, and I choose not to be part of it. It's the loudest thing you can say without saying a single word. One of the most common traps that keeps people stuck in toxic relationships, whether romantic, platonic, or even professional, is the belief that they need closure in order to move on. We're taught to think that healing only begins once we've had a final conversation, a clear explanation, or some mutual understanding. But in reality, the need for closure often disguises a deeper desire. The hope that the other person will finally take accountability, finally validate our pain, or finally change. But here's the harsh truth. The people who hurt you the most are often the least capable of giving you the closure you crave. They may never admit what they did. They may twist the story, minimize your feelings, or blame you for their behavior. And if you keep chasing clarity from someone committed to confusion, all you're doing is reopening wounds that we're already trying to heal. You're handing them a role in your healing that they're not qualified or willing to play. Closure doesn't always come with answers. It comes with acceptance. Accepting that they are who they are, that what happened happened, and that waiting for them to give you peace is like waiting for a fire to put itself out. It's not going to happen. You have to walk away while the questions are still unanswered. That's where real strength is born. And from a psychological standpoint, closure isn't something someone else gives you. It's something you create for yourself. It's the conscious decision to stop seeking emotional resolution from the same place that caused emotional damage. It's cutting the energetic cord and saying, I don't need to understand why, I just need to move forward. In fact, chasing closure can sometimes pull you right back into the toxic dynamic you're trying to escape. You reach out to talk things through, but instead you end up in another cycle of blame, deflection, and disappointment. You're re-injured in the very process that was supposed to bring you peace. True healing begins when you stop asking, why did they do that to me? And start asking, why did I tolerate it for so long? That shift is powerful because it takes the focus off of them and puts it back where it belongs, on your own growth, your own boundaries, and your own evolution. Your mind is not just where you think, it's where you live. It's the space where your emotions, self-talk, decisions, and focus are processed every single day. So when someone constantly disrupts that space with stress, confusion, guilt, or emotional chaos, they're not just bothering you, they're occupying you. And over time, that occupation becomes a form of mental warfare. One of the most dangerous effects of being around toxic people is not just what they say or do, it's how they slowly take over your inner world. You start overthinking every word, you replay conversations, you try to decode their mixed signals, you second guess your instincts. All of this consumes mental real estate space that could have been used for creativity, peace, focus, or self-growth. That's why reclaiming your mental space is more than just a self-care phrase. It's a survival skill. When you cut someone off silently, you're essentially drawing a hard boundary, not just around your life, but around your mind. You're saying, this is my space now, my energy, my peace, my clarity, and I will not share it with people who leave it cluttered and chaotic. And neurologically, this boundary matters. Every interaction you have, especially emotionally charged ones, leaves an imprint in your brain. The more you stay in toxic loops, the more mental bandwidth is used up trying to make sense of the senseless. Your cognitive load increases. Your emotional regulation decreases. You become less present, less focused, and more reactive because your brain is overloaded with psychological noise. But when you stop engaging, when you go quiet and step back, you give your brain what it desperately needs: space to breathe, space to reset, space to remember who you are outside of the drama. That this isn't about avoidance, it's about alignment. You're not running from the issue, you're creating space to rise above it. You're choosing not to rent out your head to someone who brings nothing but stress, because your mind is sacred. Your peace is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And if someone is consistently costing you clarity, they're too expensive to keep around. There's a message that silence carries, but absence delivers something even deeper. When you're no longer present, physically, emotionally, energetically, that void speaks a language toxic people understand better than any confrontation ever could. Your absence becomes the proof of what your boundaries used to merely hint at. You're done. And this time, it's real, Many people are addicted to your presence, not because they appreciate you, but because they rely on your reactions, your empathy, your forgiveness. They count on the fact that you'll always answer, always explain, always come back. They don't respect your presence. They expect it. It's a given to them. Until one day, it's not. That's when everything changes. When you remove yourself from someone's life without fanfare, no threats, no scenes, no endless final messages, you disrupt their control. You remove the comfort of your consistency, and that absence becomes a mirror they can't escape. Suddenly they feel what they didn't appreciate. They sense the weight of what they took for granted, and they realize that silence wasn't avoidance. It was your exit. But more importantly, you begin to feel the shift. Without their energy clouding your space, without their voice echoing in your head, you begin to reconnect with your own. You start hearing yourself again, your intuition, your standards, your peace. It all gets louder in their absence. You realize how much noise they brought into your life, how much space they took up, and how long you were shrinking yourself just to maintain a connection that was costing you everything internally. Absence is also accountability. Not the kind you force, but the kind life delivers in silence. When you're gone, they either grow or they don't. They either reflect or they repeat. But that's no longer your concern. You've handed back the responsibility that was never yours to carry in the first place. And the most powerful part? You didn't need revenge. You didn't need to prove anything. You didn't need to convince them of your worth. You simply left quietly, completely, and in doing so, you said everything that needed to be said. So in 2025, stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Stop breaking your own heart to keep others comfortable. You don't owe anyone access to your peace, your energy, or your presence. Not when they've shown you time and time again that they don't value it. Let your silence speak. Let your distance protect you. Let your absence restore you. Because not everyone deserves a front row seat to your evolution. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away without a sound, without a warning, without a single word, and never look back.